It's Thanksgiving football, and let me tell you a story. You're hanging out with your friends, family, and food, and adding in some football trying to win money. Well, this video will give you a clear picture of who the top plays are for the Thanksgiving slate. And we're starting out with Josh Allen, who is the play this week. I have him projected for 10 more points than any other quarterback on this slate. That is something I've never seen or even said before. He faces the Lions and their historically bad defense. Just how bad is this defense? Well, they rank 32nd in coverage. That is dead last, and borderline are one of the worst secondaries of all time. And what makes matters worse for Detroit and things better for Josh Allen is that they rank 30th in pass rush. So Allen, who's fantastic, is now going to have a lot of time to throw. And all of this is included and factored into his 31.5 point team total, which is 5 higher points than any other team on the slate. Do not overthink this one. The way to get different is to triple stack Josh Allen, play him with 3, maybe even 4 of his teammates as opposed to fading him. So if he's the play at the quarterback position, let's discuss the play at the RB spot. And this will be $6,400 Ramondre Stevenson, who I would consider him a fun play. Look, Damian Harris returned last week. He actually started, but Ramondre Stevenson played 49 snaps to Harris playing just 15 snaps. And maybe Harris having a quality game will keep people off of Stevenson even more, even at this price tag somehow. Because Harris put up over 90 yards on just 10 touches last week, but Ramondre Stevenson goes out there, he catches 6 passes, and he has 21 total touches. Stevenson now has 6 or more targets in 4 straight games as a running back and is averaging over 20 touches per game during those contests. Now he'll have a difficult matchup. The Vikings defense ranks 2nd in run stop, but they did just allow a pretty decent game to the Cowboys backfield last week. And the big thing, like Tony Pollard did last week, we just want the targets here and the red zone usage from one Ramondre Stevenson, and we're getting it. And speaking of Minnesota, they're running back at $7,400, Dalvin Cook. He's a nice little price discount off of Saquon Barkley here, who's $8,000, likely to pick up more ownership. And look, Cook's coming off a bad week, but I think it's going to work to our advantage. You see, when you look at his snaps last week, he only played 34 of a possible 57 snaps. Doesn't seem that great for a workhorse running back at this price tag, but he was pulled in the 4th quarter due to the blowout. And Cook actually had a pretty efficient game, 11 carries for 72 yards, nearly 7 yards per carry. It just resulted in 7 points because, well, his team couldn't get to the red zone often and they were trailing a lot, so he didn't see much touches. But he's actually a favorite in this one, which means likely more touches, and he faces the Patriots, who rank 18th versus the run. Not that great. So Cook would be your cheaper option compared to Saquon Barkley. And now this next situation is interesting. And this would be the Cowboys situation, where you have Tony Pollard at $6,600 and Zeke at $5,800. Last week, Tony Pollard still operated as the RB1, playing 54% of the snaps and even losing snaps in the blowout to the rookie Malik Davis out of Florida. But even though he saw more usage, he only saw 16 carries compared to Zeke seeing 15 carries in this game. And the thought was coming in that Zeke was going to be limited, and they still split the backfield. But the big difference was Tony Pollard ran 20 routes. He had a massive game in the receiving department, 2 touchdowns, 100 plus yards, to Zeke running just 5 routes. So he's still the dude in that department. The likely outcome moving forward is that this is like a 55-60% of the snap share for Tony Pollard, but they split the work on the ground, with Pollard seeing more of the passing game work, Zeke seeing the goal line work like you saw last week. So at their current price tags, I do think that Tony Pollard clearly has way more upside here. His rushing prop is at 80 plus rushing yards compared to Zeke's in the 40s, but for his price tag, I think Zeke is still in play at $5,800 is a nice leverage. Pollard is going to be massively owned. I think Ramondre Stevenson is a better play at the price tag, factoring in the ownership according to the DFS blueprint link down below for that ownership projections. Now, I'm not jumping up and down to play Zeke. It's pretty clear that Tony Pollard has way more upside on a per touch basis, but in terms of where I like playing him the most, it's on Prize Picks and his prop over 48.5 rushing yards as a 9-point favorite here, and a really good matchup against Detroit that ranks bottom 10 in run defense. I have Zeke in the mid 50s for rushing yards. I'd take this one on Prize Picks. You can too if you want. Free bet up to $100 with a link in the description below. All right, now let's go to the tight end position, because there's one dude who stands out above the rest, and that is the new Minnesota Viking and TJ Hawkinson. And not only does he stand out in terms of performance and upside, but his price tag. He's $1,200 more than anybody else, but this is justifiable. He now has 28 targets in 3 weeks as a Viking. And what's real encouraging during this time is that he ranks 4th in slot usage. He's playing 20% more out of the slot than he did in Detroit. The exact numbers are 64% of the time he's operating as a wide receiver, either in the slot or out wide. And obviously this leads to much more upside when you have a linebacker on you out wide or in the slot as a tight end, rather than you staying in the block. So at this price tag of $5,000, yeah, relative to tight ends, he's expensive, but when you compare him to the wide receiver 2 and 3s on other teams, he's basically the same price. And as we've seen, 9 targets a game with the Vikings, yeah, he has a little bit more upside there. And if we're talking about upside, look no further than Stephon Diggs, who will be the highest owned player according to the DFS blueprint link down below, against this terrible Detroit secondary, who ranks 32nd, a 31.5 point team total, and he's somehow not the most expensive wide receiver on the slate. You see, Diggs is averaging nearly 11 targets per game right now. So yeah, I think against this bad secondary, he'll be able to do whatever he wants. He has a player prop around 90 yards right now, and I actually have him projected for over 100 yards in this game. He looks like the best wide receiver. And a big reason why is because of where his targets are coming from. Yes, he's getting high volume, but he's also seeing targets downfield of 20 plus yards. He's top 5 in deep targets, and he's second in red zone targets with 15 this year. So there's a safe floor here because of the volume and a massive ceiling, which of course you already know. And I mentioned his prop. It's at 87.5 receiving yards. I took him over this number. I have him for 104 receiving yards as of right now in this game. This is the best prop we've talked about so far. Go ahead and get it with a free bet up to $100 linked down below. Now, Diggs is likely to be the highest pay-up option when you look at Dalvin Cook and Saquon and even Justin Jefferson, but it's going to make Justin Jefferson maybe a nice play here because Jefferson is $8,200. He does not have anywhere near as good of a team total at 22 points. It's 9.5 less points right now than this Buffalo Bills. And even more bad news, Jefferson is coming off of his worst game of the year. Just 3 catches for 33 yards, was kind of shut down by Trevion Diggs last week in the Dallas defense in general. I mean, Kirk Cousins did not have much time to throw in this game, so these things are going to lower the ownership, even though the projection is still solid and so is the upside. And not to mention, like Diggs, Jefferson is seeing a lot of cheat code targets, 12 deep targets, and leads the NFL with 18 red zone targets so far this season. I actually think that playing Diggs and Jefferson is a really nice way to approach this slate. You get some of the highest, probably the 2 highest ceilings on the slate in one lineup. They're expensive, so people probably won't go there. Now, without a doubt, the best thing to do on this Thanksgiving slate is take Justin Jefferson's promotional prop on Prize Picks. It's just at a half a receiving yard, right? It should be at 85.5, as you can see. They're doing a promotion up until Thursday, so make sure to act now. You can put up to $20 on this, pair it with some other props. I've done that, and we can take a look at it in a second. But all he has to do is get 1 receiving yard, which he's done in every single game that he's played in. So go ahead and get Justin Jefferson over a half a receiving yard on prizepicks.com. You'll get a free bet up to $100. So everything is free right now. A free win, some free money when you use the code SAL22. It's linked in the description below. All right, so we talked about nice wide receivers so far. Justin Jefferson might be my favorite actual play in the slate. I think Diggs is the best play, but factoring in ownership, I think Jefferson might be my favorite play. If it's not him, though, it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown at $6,600, who is definitely going to pick up ownership because he's at least $1,000 too cheap. You see, Amon-Ra had a nice week. He had 7 catches, 76 yards on 8 targets. He was tackled on the 1-yard line, so he just missed a massive week. And since returning from injury in week 7, he ranks 8th in targets so far in the season. He has 9.5 targets per game since week 7. And as massive 9-point underdogs in this one, you can expect Detroit to push towards 40 pass attempts per game. Goff is averaging around 34, 35 attempts per game, but as big underdogs, he's going to throw a little bit more, which helps Amon-Ra. So expect 10 plus targets here at a fair price point, almost a value price point for Amon-Ra. He's probably to be a top 2 owned wide receiver. Now, we've talked about a lot of expensive players, so you're going to need to find some value. Let's start introducing some of that. At the tight end position, you have $2,700 Lawrence Cager if you were willing or wanting to just punt at tight end here. Look, this guy is not the greatest of options, but he's just seeing usage right now. He played 56 snaps last week and ran 33 routes for a tight end. That's really good. Now, the issue is in 3 years into his career, he just has 6 NFL catches, but 2 of them did come last week. I mean, he has to actually get opportunities to have a chance to catch the ball. Never had a breakout season in college. He was basically just an average college tight end, but he's getting usage here at a cheap price point. Your goal is for not him to score 20 points, just score 5 to 10 and make it possible for other guys to fit in your lineup. Now, another value option in sort of the lower mid-range is $4,900 Adam Thielen, who I'm really liking this week. You see, Thielen, just like the entire Vikings offense last week, struggled. Just 2 catches, 25 yards, only 3 targets. People are going to look at this 4-point performance and probably gloss over it. But if you don't look at just that one week, outside of week 1, Thielen on his targets, as we're looking here, 7, 8, 9, 7, 8, 7, 7. He was having 7 plus targets every single week of the year since week 1 before last week. And this includes 4 games of 13 plus points, which would easily play off his current price tag. I think he likely comes in mid to lower owned here in this price range. We'll talk about another receiver right next to him, which makes him a nice play. And that other receiver right next to him in pricing is $5,000 flat Darius Slayton, who's been coming on, and he's now the #1 wide receiver, pretty clear and obvious for the Giants. And the reason I say that is Wan'Dale Robinson, after securing 13 targets last week, ended up injuring his knee, and he's out for the year with a torn ACL. And very quietly, Slayton is averaging 7 targets per game over his last 3 games, including 10 targets his last time out and getting 86 yards. He's always been a favorite target of Daniel Jones when he's out there, and he's actually been really good this year. 6th in wide receiver efficiency, 7th at beating man coverage and earning fantasy points. He's been good. Now, I do believe he's going to be picking up more ownership because of this. Now, at a $5K flat price point, naturally, when it's a flat price point, you get lower ownership than you should, so that helps him. But what doesn't help him is his matchup against a top 5 secondary in Dallas, one in which Trevion Diggs shut down Justin Jefferson to just 30 yards last week. So I actually took Darius Slayton's 50.5 receiving yards, and I went less than it. I took his under 50.5 receiving yards, and I placed a bet with this Justin Jefferson over a half a receiving yard. I placed 4 props here: the Zeke over rushing, the Diggs over receiving. It's 4 props to win 200 with that free bet that I used on Prize Picks and the free Justin Jefferson prop. We're just trying to hit these 3 other ones here. You can take this one as well. This is the community prop for this week, for this Thanksgiving slate. We could feast together, if you will. There's a link in the description below, or you can just go to prizepicks.com and use the code SAL22. All right, so Slayton is one of the Giants wide wide receivers, who else is going to be out there now that there's no Wan'Dale Robinson? Well, you have Richie James at $3,400, and then you have Isaiah Hodgins at $3,000 flat. James filled in for Wan'Dale when he left last week. He caught 3 balls, he found the end zone, so he put up 13 plus points, but he wasn't all that involved other than the touchdown. You can see in the wide receiver snaps here, it's clearly Slayton the number 1 option, and Hodgins actually started this game. He was the wide receiver 3. Rotating in was Kenny Golladay, and once Robinson got hurt, you saw Richie James rotate in. Even Marcus Johnson saw some snaps, so expect Slayton to be the main guy here. Expect Hodgins to be involved, but then 2 to 3 other wide receivers are going to rotate in. Not much upside at any of these dudes. They are cheap if you want to go to them, but I think there's better plays that we can get to in a moment. Before we do that, though, let's jump back to the quarterback position to see if there's any other options. Now, I think Josh Allen is the guy here at $8,000 still, but if you're looking for a value and you just want to play all the pay-up options at other positions, I think Kirk Cousins at $5,600 is interesting. After having an awful week last week, it's likely to lower his ownership. And this is a guy in Kirk Cousins who's throwing 39 times per game. He doesn't have the greatest team total. He is a slight favorite here, so it should not actually set up to be a 30-point game, which Josh Allen could hit here, but the price tag is factoring that in. Now, I'm not all that enticed to go there. Now, a running back who looks interesting is Jamal Williams at $5,900, who just had his 5th multi-touchdown game of just this season alone. And it makes sense when you have the 2nd most red zone touches coming into last week. He leads the NFL now with 33 red zone carries on the ground. So finding the end zone isn't the craziest thing in the world. He played 48% of the snaps last week, which still led this backfield. But the concern for him would be that Justin Jackson and Swift, both who played less snaps than him last week, they actually ran more routes than him. And the Lions this week are 9-point underdogs. So he has a decent rushing prop because the Bills aren't great against the run. They're actually bottom 5 versus the run. So Jamal Williams is having like a 60-yard rushing prop. But if he's not finding the end zone here, if they're not moving the ball a lot, it's likely he's coming off the field for other guys to see the routes run. So I'm a little bit hesitant on Jamal Williams at this price tag. I mean, Ezekiel Elliott is right there as a leverage option off of him with, in my opinion, better touchdown upside as a 9-point favorite. Now, another 5K running back is Devin Singletary, who has the best team total, who is a massive favorite and is cheap at $5,700. What's not to like here? And the dude just keeps producing. He had 20 more touches last week, nearly goes for 100 yards, finds the end zone, 18 fantasy points, and he's still the clear running back 1 here, playing 47 snaps last week. That's 72% of the snaps. Want even more good news? Well, he faces the Detroit Lions, like I said, is a big favorite, and the Lions rank 24th in run defense. So I think he's in play, and then you just might want to talk about from a Millie Maker standpoint, a really big contest. What about the other Buffalo running backs? Well, you have $4,500 Nyheim Hines, $4,400 James Cook. Now, James Cook did see 7 carries last week, but he only played 25% of the snaps, only 6 more than Nyheim Hines. And Hines is reportedly, after 3 games, still learning the playbook. So hopefully on this short week, he can learn it and see even more snaps. It's not a sure thing, but it's a possibility. And if he does, reminder, he was traded for a 6th-round pick and Zach Moss. So if he's out there, he's going to end up probably seeing equal to more snaps than the 2nd-round pick in James Cook. I really don't think either in play, but if you're looking for a crazy off-the-board play at the running back position for Thursday and a Millie Maker to try and win $1 million against a bunch of other people, well, Nyheim Hines is probably that guy. We head back to the tight end position now, and Dawson Knox at $3,500, I assume picks up a lot of ownership, might even have more than TJ Hawkinson because of the price tag and what he just did. He just had his best game. He caught all 7 of his targets for 70 yards, 14 fantasy points, and he now has 13 targets the past 2 weeks. He's starting to heat up here, and he's really easy to fit into these double or triple stacks for the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen. I actually think that playing Hawkinson and Knox is a way to get a little bit unique, a way to save money in your lineup and have lots of upside, especially in the red zone. So Knox is a really good value who likely picks up ownership. A value that I'm not that high on is Isaiah McKenzie at $4,000. Normally, he's a guy I want to play, $4,000 attached to this really good offense, but his usage dropped. He only played 40% of the snaps last week. He started to split more snaps with the rookie Khalil Shakur, which is down from him playing nearly 70% of the snaps the previous 2 games. And he has just 66 total yards, not in each game total, over his last 5. The upside is just not here, and now he's losing work. In a similar price range, I'd rather go to KJ Osborne at $3,600, who's actually, in my opinion, more of a fun play. He only played 3 less snaps than Justin Jefferson last week, and this is kind of his role. This team plays a lot of 11 personnel. Yeah, TJ Hawkinson is there, so he's kind of the 4th option now, but he's running a ton of routes. And just 2 weeks ago, with Hawkinson there, he earned 11 targets. It only produced 7 fantasy points. When you're out there that much, you're a decent player. You're looked upon in the red zone sometimes as well. At this price tag, I actually think he's a better play than the Giants guys and even Isaiah McKenzie. Now, there's one more quarterback who's at least in play for this slate, and that would be Dak Prescott at $6,200, mostly because he has a 26.5-point team total, the 2nd highest on the slate, and he's a quality QB. The problem is, even when he has a good week like last week, he's only scoring 20 points because he's not throwing a lot. He was really efficient, 22 of 25 passing, but just 25 pass attempts. He's only top 30 once this year. And now his team is facing a Giants run defense that ranks 25th in the NFL as a 9-point favorite. They're incentivized to run the ball, especially in the second half, leads to less upside. I still just stick to Josh Allen there, but maybe on the opposite side of that game from Dak, Saquon Barkley at $8,000 could be in play. After all, Barkley is literally the #1 used running back in the NFL, seeing 85% of his backfield's touches. That's the targets in overall touches on the ground this year, and his snaps at 83% leads the NFL. Now, it's an interesting spot because he has a good matchup against Dallas. They're not great against the run. Even last week, they didn't give up a ton Arizona total yards overall, but they got a big, so Minnesota couldn't run the ball. They were having success. 11 carries, 72 yards, Dalvin Cook. The bigger issue here is that Saquon relies on volume. He's only averaging like 4.3 yards per touch this year, which is outside the top 25 running backs. And as a 9-point underdog, he might not see that volume, which means you need to rely on him in the passing game, which is definitely possible, but at $8,000, I don't really want to get there as much. And if you want to see exactly how much Saquon is projected for his ownership and every other player on the slate, the optimal plays and the ones to avoid, you can check out the DFS blueprint link down below, which thousands of other people are currently using to help them win more DFS. And maybe Jacoby Myers is one of those guys. At $5,100, he's still the wide receiver 1 for his team, having 6 targets last week and now has 24 total targets his last 3 games. But the problem for Myers and really this whole team is their inability to attack downfield, which when they're not getting to the red zone as much, you're not having the deep targets or as many red zone targets, means it's really hard for you to have a big game. So if there's anywhere that I'm actually playing Myers, it would just be over in his props market. I have him projected in the upper 50s, so I'll take him over 50.5 yards on Prize Picks. But I'll just prefer other options in the price range, like an Adam Thielen who has a red zone role, and then we can go back up to the top of the wide receiver market to talk about this next guy. And that would be CeeDee Lamb, who in my opinion is a must. The top 4 wide receivers are by far and away 4 of probably like the best 6 or 7 plays on this slate. He'll be facing the Giants secondary that ranks 31st this year in the NFL, and Lamb with Dak Prescott over his last 3 games is averaging 9 targets per game. I mean, if there's a way to play all 4 of these wide receivers and make it work, I think that's probably the optimal thing to do. But if you're not going to play those guys, drop down a little bit and add another piece to your Bills stack. And you could do this by playing Gabe Davis at just $5,300, much better play in my opinion upside wise than Darius Slayton and Jacoby Myers. You see, Davis led the team this past week with 7 targets. He had a nice game around 12 fantasy points, 68 yards, and he continues every single week to play the most snaps, to run the most routes ahead of Stephon Diggs. So he's out there a lot. It's just a matter of targets. So I think Davis is a really solid play at the wide receiver position, and I mainly want him when I'm playing Josh Allen and a bunch of other dudes. Play Dawson Knox, Stephon Diggs, and Gabe Davis. Play Devin Singletary, Stephon Diggs, and Gabe Davis. Now we should at least mention Dalton Schultz at $3,800 because I do think he'll be a leverage play. I do think Hawkinson picks up ownership due to the volume. Dawson Knox recent success and playing for the Bills. In between there, you're gonna have Dalton Schultz at just $3,800, gonna be lower owned. And he had a bad week last week, but he had 5 targets. He continues to play the same role, playing 47 of 64 snaps last week, even being pulled late in the game due to the blowout. And what you can expect here is 25 plus routes, 5 or 6 targets in red zone usage. He's trusted by Dak, especially when they enter that red zone, making him a nice leverage play. Again, like I said about Hawkinson and Dawson Knox, I do think that a Knox and a Schultz is an interesting way to get different as well, and it's cheap. So now let's go back to some values. There's Michael Gallup at $4,600, who will definitely be low owned because he just looks slower on tape. He looks less dynamic from what I'm seeing, and right now he's just an average wide receiver. I mean, you can look at his game logs this year right here. His receptions, 2 for 24, 4 for 44, 4 for 49, 4 for 35. This past week, he goes 4 for 49. It is the definition of average at the wide receiver position. You know, you're getting 7 to 10 fantasy points. Now, if he finds a touchdown in any of those games, it's a nice day, and at the price tag, it leaves it open for that type of success. So in a range where Slayton will pick up ownership and Gabe Davis and even Adam Thielen some, I don't think there's going to be anything going to Michael Gallup, which is why I actually like him. And now we can close up the values with an interesting play. This guy I like more than the Giants values, and it's Nelson Aguilar at $3,100 in a nice matchup against Minnesota's secondary. And Aguilar returned last week. He was the by far and away second wide receiver on the Patriots, ahead of Devontae Parker, running 10 more routes than him and playing 12 more snaps. So if you're searching in that range, he's a solid value for you if you indeed need him. Now these are the players that you must have, and even some of them that you must avoid on the slate, given their ownership and given their upside. And again, if you want to see the exact numbers on what the upside and ownership and a whole lot more is for this slate and every slate on the year across multiple sports, we'll check out the DFS blueprint linked down below.